Welcome back, dear listeners, to Fright or Flight, the podcast where we rank, recap, and review every horror movie in a given franchise.
I'm Jumpscare Jer and/or Geraldine, the Fright of the podcast.
And I'm Frankie. I'm the Flight of the podcast, and today we're starting our season on one of the most iconic horror movie franchises of all time. Isn't that right, Geraldine?
It is.
What are we talking about?
We're talking about Halloween.
That's right. Are you ready to embark on this journey?
I am. This is just one of many because there are many timelines.
Oh my gosh, there's so many Halloween movies.
So many.
We're going to cover basically the first five, which with the exception of the third movie.
Yes, Season of the Witch. We're not covering.
But we're covering
kind of a standalone.
We're covering the sixth film, but the first five in this original sequel timeline. Have you ever watched this movie before?
I have, many times.
Do you remember the first time you watched it or how you came across it?
My dad let me watch it when I was young.
Your father?
Mm-hmm. He just made us close our eyes during the opening scene with Judith and the scene with Linda and the scene with Annie where I think it shows her boobs just a little bit. So lots of boob shots where eyes were closed.
But the murder, A-okay.
A-okay.
Yeah. Well, let's get right to it. It's the 70s, right?
It is.
It's a different time. A little horror landscape of horror movies that were coming out at the time. We have Texas Chainsaw Massacre, The Exorcist, Rosemary's Baby, Amityville Horror. These movies are a little different. A lot of the popular tropes, in horror movies at the time, they typically featured a lot of exploitation and gore. I mean, you watch Texas Chainsaw, oh my gosh. The Last House on the Left, same thing. It's just a lot of blood everywhere. Mm-hmm. Supernatural horror was really big at the time, like The Exorcist and The Omen. I will say at the time, audiences that were going out to see movies was shifting a little bit to teenage and young adult. The demographic was changing, seeking thrills and chills at the cinema. And I just want to take a moment real quick to talk about people during this time period too, and people and children too. Geraldine, have you ever heard the phrase just walk it off from your parents?
Rub some dirt in it, all of the likes of it. Yeah.
Well, you know how there's so many people in their 40s and 50s, and there are people who complain about participation trophies and how kids are so coddled these days. They want free health care, they want free college. I have to pay for my own college. Why should they get free college or whatever? Well, the reason I think for that is a lot of these people who grew up in the 70s and 80s were neglected. It wasn't unusual for 6-year-olds, 8-year-olds, 10 to be left unsupervised for long periods of time. I mean, they'll spend their nights wandering the woods or bike for hours, miles away from home without telling their parents where they were going to be, without having any form of communication. I mean, this is before cell phones. Now we'll just be hey, Mom, I'm going to go to Annie's house for yada, yada, yada. And it was just a different time back then. And something that I learned recently, something that surprised me, is they would even run ads on TV for parents to remind their kids to hug them, to hug their kids.
Mommy, what's for supper?
Can't you see that I'm on the phone? Hold it down, I just got home. Isn't it enough that I work all day?
At least you get a chance to get away. Dishes, diapers, dirty rags.
Bosses, bills, and nag.
Daddy.
Shut up, kids, you're in the way. I'm so mad I can slap your face.
Did I do something wrong?
Have you hugged your kid today? Did you send him on his way? With love, 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 love. She's a person just like you. She's got feelings too, so give her love, 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 love. If you hug him for a while, it'll leave you with a smile. He'll know it's love, 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 love.
It's funny.
It is hilarious. It's unfortunate. And and whenever I say this to people that are in that age demographic, they are very offended because Gen Xers like to view themselves as tough.
They are tough. I mean, they had to be.
You're right. Yeah, it's
a very different time. I mean, we couldn't let. I don't have children, and you don't have children.
No.
But I mean, we couldn't let if we had hypothetical children, we couldn't just let them wander off without supervision. Things are different now.
Yeah, people, God, no. Everything is very different now. I mean, you don't have any kids, but you have a niece, right?
Yeah.
And the idea of letting these kids Stranger things out nowadays is just, that's beyond us. You know what I mean?
I remember when I was younger, I would be outside for many, we would just play outside for all day long, sometimes on the weekends and stuff. But our parents would come, they would say, stay in the yard. So it was very different for them too, because even when they grew up, They wouldn't say, go do what you want and just be home by dark.
Yeah, exactly.
That's what they had. We had like, hey, stay in the yard. And now my niece Scarlett, like the parents, I feel like my sister's constantly with her for that kind of thing. Like, you're not going to be out of my eyesight.
Even
because
more so.
You just can't trust it. It's like the leash is tightening.
No, you're right. We live in a dangerous world. We really do. And talking about being home before dark, here's another ad that they were run. Just telling parents that like, hey, it's 10 o'clock. Where the hell are your kids?
Yeah, I think I heard a comedian talk about this one.
You know where your children are?
It's 10 p.m. Do you know where your children are?
It's 10 p.m. Do you know where your children are?
It's 10 p.m. Do you know where your children are?
It's 10 p.m. Do you know where your children are?
It's 10 p.m. Do you know where your children are?
It's 10 p.m. Do you know where your children are?
It's hilarious.
It's hilarious. The top comment on that video, by the way, when I watched it was like, I remember seeing this on the TV and hearing my uncle go like, shit, where are my kids? And
That's perfect.
And I mean, they were on, these kind of ads were on TV for a reason. I mean, that was Cyndi Lauper at the beginning, trying to remind parents like, hey, you should probably try to find out where they are right now.
But that's the thing, is that I'm not saying that there weren't bad people and bad things happening back then. They just weren't as people probably
Reported.
weren't as aware. I mean,
yes, I agree.
But now we have the visibility and the awareness that is constantly being reported. It's almost information overwhelm. People are terrified of anything bad happening because people kind of heighten that anxiety with it.
Yeah,
you know?
I agree. I think both parents and children at this time were just naive to all the crime and all the kidnapping that was happening, especially involving children.
But you know what's different too is my grandmother talked about this before, like where she trusted her neighbor to like, you know, help take care of her kids after school and stuff. And I feel like we don't have that now where you're like, you know, good friends with your neighbors, you know?
No, I will say that's double-sided. I do think we're a lot more like, I mean, I want to mention this later in this movie. For example, there's a scene where we see Lori. She is hurt. She is running away from Michael. And she goes to a neighbor's house and they turn on their light. She's banging on their door, screaming for help. And they see her and they don't open the door for her. And I'm over here thinking, like, Geraldine ain't opening the door.
I mean...
Bailey ain't opening the door.
I'm not saying I wouldn't, but I mean, I don't know how far away the bad thing is from behind you. Like, I'm trying to be calculated in my decision. I'm trying to keep me and my family safe, too. Not that I think that they should go through that themselves, but you know what I mean?
No.
I'm looking out for me. And as much as I want to... I like to think that in that situation... I don't know. I talk a lot of shit, you know? I do. I talk a lot of shit, but I, at heart, am a helper. I like to help people.
Me too.
And I would probably lay down my life to help somebody to my detriment. But do I know what I would do in this situation? Absolutely not. I feel like I would have so much anxiety that I may not. I would be so scared. I'd probably freeze.
Well, I want to mention
that,
you know, I'm talking about, like, you're talking about how you feel like you maybe you wouldn't help them. Who knows? Maybe you would. Yeah. But I feel like that's kind of reflective about a lot of people in America now. I think we're not trusting. I think we're people who we're looking out for ourselves way more than we're looking out for our community, for our neighbors.
Here's my thing, though, is that we've kind of been taught to be that way because there are too many people who will take advantage of your kindness. And I mean, for example, I like to, you know, whenever I see anybody on the side of the road with like signs, I do my best. If I have cash, I will do my best to give them something, just because it makes it, you know, I like to know that I've possibly helped somebody, right? And it breaks my heart knowing that there are people out there who are taking advantage of that situation, and knowing that people would just be kind and give them money, or like if somebody was needing help, that they're just doing it to, I don't know, get something free out of it, or, you know, something like that. Just freeloading, not like necessarily freeloading, because I don't believe in like, oh, like you're getting things for free. No, I don't really care about that. It's the aspect that you're taking advantage of someone's kindness, and not necessarily resources, but just kindness. Like if you're really in trouble and people go to at will's length to help you, I think that that's not nice. I think that that's really shitty.
Well, that's kind of what I want to bring up, like the time period and what people were like in this time, because I will say it kind of feels like 70s and 80s. They were a time of innocence, you know, despite all these awful, like serial killers. A lot of the most famous ones were around during this time. And that's because, and a lot of them got away because this is a time period before we had cameras everywhere.
Yeah.
You know, now every store you're in, every road you drive down, there's several cameras. I mean, you just drive down one neighborhood, you're going to get caught by like 10 blink cameras just on the way.
But like the 70s and 80s were a cautionary tale to what we have now.
Yes, I agree. I mean, the term even serial killer didn't come up until around this time frame. And people were just now learning that like, oh, wait, a person can kill for like no reason.
Yeah.
And like that wasn't a big concept before. And I think that's part of the thing that makes this so scary is like at a time where I was just talking about like all these super gory or like, you know, possession or spiritual kind of movies, the concept of a man coming into your house and stabbing you with a knife is the scariest concept for several kids this age could ever think of. Like right now it's like, oh, whatever. But back then it's like it was so raw and it's something that could happen in real life that the rawness of it and the reality just scared people so much.
And I completely understand that because I mean, Michael Myers is scary because he doesn't run. He doesn't chase you. He just walks.
Yeah, he just stalks you.
Yeah, he's just like the shape. He's just like the stalking, you know, kind of thing. And it's just, that's terrifying to me because it's like, dang, dude. Somehow he still manages to catch up though.
Yeah. Now that is something that John Carpenter, the director of this film, was super important to him that, you know, just like how this film doesn't feature a lot of gore, he wanted to make this movie a lot more suspenseful.
It is.
He kind of wanted to make it similar to how he grew up listening to radio shows and it having like a scare every 10 minutes, but doing it in a little bit of a more patient way.
Or building up to it.
Yes, with more tension. A little bit about the production side of Halloween. It was done on a budget of $300,000.
Imagine that.
$300,000. I don't know if you guys know, but any movie, like a cheap movie, for example, that we saw last year was Thanksgiving. Yeah. Crazy that it's almost been a year since that movie came out.
Yeah.
And it was done on a super cheap budget of like $30 million. That's really cheap. And for this to be done at a third of a million.
Say cheap, and that's not even that's not even remotely cheap.
For a movie.
For a movie, whatever. But to me, I'm like, what?
And for $300,000, they were able to get this movie financed by Mustafa Akkad. He's also a filmmaker who's since passed away, but his son is actually the person who greenlights all the new movies and all the sequels in the franchise.
Love that.
Mustafa actually passed tragically during an Al-Qaeda bombing in Jordan.
Very sad.
So this movie is part of his legacy. You know? And,
absolutely. I've never even heard of him until now. So that's great to kind of bring him up and, you know, bring awareness.
Well, we have these 2 DVDs on the, if you're watching the YouTube version of this, and one of them is a 2-pack of Halloween 2 and 3, right? It doesn't include the original. Most merch made from the Halloween franchise is made from Halloween 2, not the original movie. Why is that? It's because that Mustafa has most of the rights. His son has most of the rights for the original Halloween movie. And so he's he's not as lenient as giving out licensing agreements for the movie.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah. This movie was made big time DIY. The crew of this movie is it's basically like a family. Like it's people who know each other, people who aren't necessarily doing it for the money, but just a passion for the project. There's not a studio involved. You know, that the distributing didn't come until later.
So it's kind of like the first Evil Dead.
I want to say, yeah. Like I feel like this movie is kind of reflective of the horror community, where like now it's just a bunch of people who are just passionate about like an art.
Yeah, I agree.
This movie features a lot of what is known as guerrilla filmmaking. For example, it's filmed in a regular neighborhood.
I love that.
In real houses to avoid spending any money on set. The use of practical locations in Los Angeles also helped overcome budget limitations to create the fictional town of Haddonfield. The team cleverly used these locations to capture the desired autumnal atmosphere, even though the filming took place in spring.
I wouldn't have guessed it. It just screams fall, and I love it for that reason. Every year I'm like, oh.
I don't disagree. However, I did notice very early on, I was like, this is supposed to be fall in like Illinois, and everything is bright green.
Yeah, we don't see a lot of orange.
There's no fall or autumn foliage.
I think that's part of the reason the pumpkins. There's so many pumpkin around, and the kids are all wearing like a bunch of jackets.
Whole pumpkins, yeah.
Well, I will say that like also like they did have like crunchy leaves on the ground, like that kind of thing. The soggy leaves. To me, I'm just like I just think of like, even though it's spring, I think they can be equated as like very similar like seasons because it's a lot of rain, a lot of like gloom, and I love it. I live for the gloomy gloomy weather is my favorite.
Well, let's go over some of the cast, Sherilyn.
Okay.
One of the most notable actors in this film is Donald Pleasance.
I love him so much.
As Dr. Samuel Sam Loomis. The actor for Professor Loomis was involved because his daughter liked the main theme for this movie. The budget of the entire movie, like I said, was $300,000, of what he got paid $25,000.
Wow, that's probably a huge deal back then.
Yeah, that's a big portion of the budget. You know, they saved money in general on actors.
Mm-hmm.
This was kind of like the bigger bill that they spent on it. As Jamie Lee Curtis is also in the film, of course, as Laurie Strode. This is her first movie.
It is her first movie, and one of her most notable roles. Her mother is very known in the horror community for Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho.
That's right, because she plays the lady in the shower.
Yep, Marion Crane.
That's right. Nick Castle as the Shape, a.k.a. Michael Myers, when he's masked.
Also, happy belated birthday, Nick Castle.
Yeah, happy birthday. It's interesting to me that they have a different actor, Tony Marin, who plays Michael Myers, who, by the way, is 21. It's because 15 plus 6 is 21. But in the credits, it's listed that he's 23.
Oopsie.
Oopsie doopsie. Michael Myers does get unmasked at the end of the movie, but it's not Nick Castle that you see. So that's interesting. I don't know why they did that.
I don't know why they did that either. That's always really weird to me.
Yeah, it's super weird. Will Sandon plays Michael Myers when he's 6. So there's 3 different actors that play Michael Myers in this movie. Mm-hmm. Nancy Keys is Annie Brackett, who is credited as Nancy Loomis. PJ Souls plays Linda, who is also Carrie, the hat girl.
Yep.
In Carrie. Do you remember that?
I do remember that.
Yeah, she wears this funny little hat. She's in this too, so cool to see her again. Charles Cipher plays Sheriff Lee Brackett. Kyle Richards, Lindsay Wallace, Brian Andrews, Tommy Doyle, and Sandy Johnson as Judith Myers. Mm-hmm. She's the one that little Mike Myers kills at the beginning of the movie.
Like brushing her hair, like naked, and like the really high-waisted panties.
Yes, that's right. And she's actually, in real life, she was a Playboy model.
Amazing.
She obtained her master's degree and PhD in Texas. After she appeared in Playboy, she went on into acting, which I thought she did a lovely job, by the way. I couldn't give her performance enough praise. Truly one of the most underrated roles in the movie, I personally believe. What do you think?
I know exactly why you're saying this. You just want to get under our skin.
No.
Her role, all you see is eye level of young Michael Myers, and you just see her tits flailing. That's it.
Like I said, underrated.
Michael! And then, come on, that's it.
Oh wow!
And then she just lays down, and all you see is more tits with blood.
Too much shade. Give Sandy Johnson and Judith Myers some respect.
Sandy Johnson as Judith Myers, you did fantastic. However,
so let's talk a little bit about how Halloween is set apart from the other movies of its time.
Okay.
Like I mentioned before, it has minimal gore. I mean, if you compare it to like Evil Dead and Texas Chainsaw, oh my god, you don't see nearly as much. And also, it's super funny to me that all the blood is like bright red.
Well, yeah. I mean, a lot of the time they have to use like corn syrup. Like it can't really look super duper realistic, but that's how they get away with it.
It's that red dye 40, baby.
Yeah.
It works like a charm.
This movie features a lot of power of suggestions, a lot of atmosphere stuff. Like we already talked about, like the tension a little bit. The camera work is something that I want to note for this film.
Oh yeah, it's great.
It's one of the first films to use a Steadicam. And that's just a camera that can, move without being like all jolty while you're moving it. So that's why we get that POV shot at the beginning of the film.
Love the POV shot and the fact that they put like the little mask holes. So it's just so creative.
Yeah, that was cool. I will say, Bailey pointed this out. First of all, when this is the first time I'm seeing the movie. Mm-hmm. So when the kid goes outside after he has done the deed and his parents come home, right? And it's like, it's a child. Yeah. Blew my mind. I did not know. I was not expecting it to be a kid whatsoever.
Yeah,
and secondly,
it's a big twist.
And secondly, the height was of a tall man. It was not of a child.
Yeah, the Steadicam was definitely like 5'8" or something.
Yeah, so maybe that helped with the reveal, I guess, because if it was closer to the ground, then I'd be like, oh yeah, maybe it's a little kid.
Wasn't really thinking. I mean, listen, we were talking about Sandy Johnson. I think that at that level, it makes sense because boys will be boys. No, I'm just kidding.
That was weird, I will say.
Yeah, I'm like, you're just gonna walk in on your sis, but also, why are you brushing your hair all naked? Like, that's just weird to me.
Yeah, like your clothes are right there. You don't want to put on
obviously the power of suggestion. We know her and her boyfriend did the deed. We get it.
Yeah, they were doing something up there. That's
we get
for sure.
it. So I understand why it is that way, but horror unfortunately always just gets away with the sexualization of women and boobs.
Well, I kind of think, to me, it's not super unfortunate, and not because of other reasons.
Oh my god!
But because in general, something I want to bring up about this movie is how much of an independent project it was. Like other movies that I talked about earlier, they were made from studios. They were made with much bigger budgets, and I think horror film is integral with independent film as well as pornography. I think pornography film, as much as you want to throw shade on it because it's not real not you personally, but people, society, they're like, oh, you're a porn actress, you're a POS, you're not real actor or whatever. And while a lot of the audience consumes this media for specific purposes, I think there's still some respect for it to be had, especially on an independent level. And I think elements like the rawness I was talking about earlier, some themes of it looking kind of crappy, making it feel more real. I mean, this is kind of the era where, like, quote unquote snuff film feeling movies come out of, I think adds to a level of emotion and a level of charm. I think it's hard to separate sexuality from horror. I think it's done so nowadays, but when I look back on it, it's easy for me to view it as like it's because the directors could get away with it, or it's because of this kind of like malintention somewhere along the line with it.
Yeah.
But when you have people like Deborah Hill, who was very integral to this film particularly, and having a voice in it, I think there's something to say about it. I think there's something to take back about it personally.
I think the initial idea was just, we're going to get people into a theater. We want couples to come by, and we want the guys to bring their girlfriends and for their girlfriends to get scared, and we want the guys to get turned on.
I agree.
That was the whole point of what they were doing.
Yeah, but you know me. I like looking back at media and trying to find a way to like romanticize it.
I don't romanticize tits. Sorry. I mean, I'm not saying that there's not validity to your statement, but I don't think that it's as romantic as you think it is.
I agree. I don't think it's intended to be that way. I'm just saying it could be taken into a different perspective.
I think it's for the male gaze, unfortunately. And even though there are women involved in these productions, unfortunately, it's just male gaze. They're like, we want to see some tits. Mm-hmm. It's also producers. You have sicko producers who've been around for fucking ever, like Harvey Weinstein's dumbass, who's involved in some of these movies, and like other people who are like him who've gotten away with horrible things have always had their like, we want to see this. They also have the final say.
Did you notice that all the girls that were overly sexualized in this movie were the ones that were quote unquote dumb and ended up dying?
Yes.
But Jamie Lee Curtis was the quote unquote smart one and was never sexualized? Yeah,
this is one of those things. I mean, we saw it in Scream.
Yep, Randy's rules.
Yeah, Randy's rules. And this is one of the things in horror movies that this Halloween takes as one of the movies that helped build that trope up. That if you have to be faithful, you have to be a virgin, and that's what gets you to survive. If you delve into one of these sins, like having premarital sex,
drugs, alcohol, typically you die. Yeah,
then you're gonna end up dying.
Or you say, I'll be right back. You don't come back.
Yeah, exactly.
We just watched Scream, I think yesterday, so
really
very fresh on the mind. Randy Meeks.
So yeah, this is one of those movies that influence that. So that's a good thing to bring up, Bailey. You mentioned the other teenagers in this movie. That's another thing that made this movie a little scarier. Is that, like I said, the demographic was shifting to where younger people were starting to go to theaters more often as opposed to the older adults. And along with the relatable age for the characters, we also have a suburban setting.
Yeah.
Like usually a lot of these movies take place in either bigger places or more rural places. Another thing that made this more real is that it was taken just in a regular neighborhood.
Very cool. I do appreciate that a lot, especially the small town vibes, walking past like storefronts and stuff like that. Love it.
John Carpenter, obviously a name that we've covered before here on the podcast when we covered Christine. He is a master of horror. He is known for some of his independent movies and then making it into bigger budget films that he ended up doing later down the road after the success of Halloween, because this movie made $70 million at the box office.
For $300,000.
For a third of $1,000,000. He made $70 million.
It is one of the most notable classic horror films that you can watch any year, and I love it so much. Even though I've watched it with Patrick, and he's got lots of critiques because it is dated, very dated. But I love it because it's like they had to be creative with that time. It's not something that was super well known. They had to do things, and especially knowing that it's even more independent makes it even more lovable because it's like, of course you can't stab a person with a knife and stab them through a painting and then them stick to the wall. Of course that's impossible. That was very silly. But it's cool.
At least it made us giggle while we were watching it. Right?
Yes, I will say this movie made me giggle a few times, which I usually don't do.
Bob.
Yeah, and there's no people named Bob anymore. That's another thing.
Well, I mean, it's no offense, kind of a dumb name.
Just
sounds to me. It just sounds like the word bounce. Like it just Bob.
And bounce. We just watched Beetlejuice too.
I know.
Dang.
I love Bob though.
Another important person in the production of this movie is Deborah Hill.
Yes.
She actually wrote the first draft of the movie. Basically, everything with the babysitters came from her, while John Carpenter came back and added in everything that dealt with Loomis and all of like he's so evil and like there's a darkness in his eyes.
He's dark-sided.
Yeah, that was all Carpenter's input in the dialogue and stuff, which is actually. I was definitely more interested in like the babysitter aspect than I was like Loomis running around trying to find.
I think it adds to the suspense, truthfully.
Yeah, me too. I like his character and I like his involvement, but it's just so funny the juxtaposition of like the teenagers talking to each other and then Loomis just trying to convince the sheriff of like this evil that has come to town.
Evil. Yeah.
The score.
Amazing.
Iconic, of course.
One of the best scores ever. Like I said, I grew up. My dad, we would listen to these scores on a CD in his car, and with the windows rolled down during the fall, my dad would be wearing like his leather jacket type of thing, and he'd have like a little skeleton hanging from the rear view mirror thing, and all you could smell was the tobacco burning, and you could just see the leaves falling, and you're just listening to this movie soundtrack. So good. That's why I have main character energy, like Laurie's theme. Are you kidding me? Laurie's theme. I'm like looking out the window, like I'm Laurie.
Yeah, I think it's amazing. I don't think there's anybody who hasn't heard the main theme at least at one point in their life or another.
It's all so good. Even The Shape Lurks, like just all so suspenseful and wonderful.
Well, what makes it interesting is John Carpenter actually did all the music in the film himself.
I did know that.
Yeah, isn't that crazy? He's like a man of many talents.
He is.
Yeah, and a tour for sure. There's actually a story about John Carpenter meeting with a distributing agent before the music was added, and the agent said that the movie wasn't scary at all. But after they added the music, the agent completely thought differently, and I think it just goes to show that like how integral music is to a film.
Oh yeah,
and like how like it adds to the suspense so much.
I agree.
I can't imagine what it's like to score a movie. I feel like it's probably like a really difficult job, and also like I think people forget a lot of the time that like you are on a team.
Yeah.
And so like when we watch a movie, we think like, oh man, this director's amazing, or like, oh, this director's awful. And we put all the blame or praise on the one person. But really, it was like he had to rely on so many other people.
Yeah.
Like it's not their script. They're working with a writer's script, and they're working with these actors' performances and the cinematographer's shots. You know, it's a team effort for sure. Down to the music, down to the sound effects. What are those people called? Foley artists?
Yeah, the Foley artists.
Yeah.
And even like down to the marketing. I mean, marketing is integral for, independent films like this too. So I wonder how great the marketing was back then. Of course, we weren't even alive. We weren't even thought of. No conception at that point. No. So it's like, I wonder what the marketing was like back then. I can only imagine the cheesy like trailer, like coming soon, like
wow, yeah. I mean, that's a big part of it. Horror movie posters were so important at this time period. Like, you had to have a good movie poster and a good tagline. Taglines at the time were like, that's what got you to go see the movies.
Taglines are great.
Yeah.
Love taglines.
Well, you have to have a good one. And the movie poster for this is iconic. I mean, it's that pumpkin and him holding up that knife.
My dad actually has tattoos of the pumpkins on his back from like these movies. So very, very, very notable. He's got one of them as a tramp stamp.
Oh, wow.
Before it was called a tramp stamp.
Interesting. No, I know you're like a connoisseur of horror film, but have you ever been interested in getting any horror related tattoos?
Yeah, I mean, I just need what you need for everything, money. I have like thoughts.
Any ideas?
Oh yeah, I have tons of ideas.
Could you spare a couple?
Yeah, I mean, I could, but I mean, I don't want anyone to steal my ideas. But I'm sure I'm not the only one who's had these ideas.
Probably not.
A lot of some of them are also related to video games that I love and play and stuff like that. My sister and I want to get matching Coraline tattoos, like all kinds of things like that they have just been integral. When I was younger, I used to say I'm gonna grow up and get a full back piece of Tim Burton. Obviously, I've changed my mind since then. I don't want a full back piece. That'd be a lot. But I would love full arm sleeves, full leg sleeves, a little bit of a chest tattoo. I want to be tatted up, I promise. Tatted up would be dope. And then you get to see me and you'd be like, oh my God, she's so cute. And I'd be like, yeah, I know, I'm tatted. I'm cool.
Okay. Well,
I only have 4 tattoos right now, so they're just hidden.
Yeah. If you guys have any Halloween tattoos, please comment it down below and tell me what you got.
Or any tattoo recommendations or artists.
For sure.
Are you going to get tattooed?
Yeah, I want to get matching tattoos with Bailey, of course.
That'd be fun.
Yeah. But I'm scared of needles, so I don't know how.
I promise you, I'm also scared of needles. I'm scared of getting my blood drawn. It is not the same,
But
and I will go to the grave with that.
I have very low pain tolerance too.
Oh, you can use numbing cream. I mean, people do that. I know people might say like have controversy surrounding that.
Really?
But if you don't want to have the pain, but you want the cool art, do it. Use the numbing cream. I don't use the numbing cream, but I also like the pain.
You like the pain?
I do like the pain.
You're a sadist.
No, there are some people who like it. There are some people who like it. I promise.
Well, talking about Halloween, it is crazy to me that this movie was able to steal that title. Like, how have we not gotten a horror movie called Halloween up until this point?
Right. But then again, think about the times. Like, before then, like, I mean, Psycho was so controversial, and that was the 50s.
Yeah.
And that was something that was so different, and people were like, it was the talk of the town, and everyone was like scared to death. And it's like when you watch it now with your lens, and you're like, this isn't scary.
Yeah.
But it's cool. It's creative.
Well, I want to say that we watched this movie recently. What do you think about Halloween and like? Does it hold up? Is it still as scary, do you think it was for those people that were watching it in the 70s?
I can only imagine how crazy it was to watch this as it came out. Like, oh my God, it'd be so cool. That'd be the only reason I would ever use a time machine, just to go back to like these iconic moments in history, like Psycho and like everyone's like reaction to that, Exorcist, Texas Chainsaw, like just to experience these live and see other people's reactions. Because I can only imagine the theaters being like, oh, like people were so dramatic back then too.
Yeah, people would faint.
They would. As
somebody who comes from like a horror family, you just mentioned your dad apparently is a big fan of Halloween. Does your mom enjoy the Halloween franchise?
She does enjoy the Halloween franchise, not as much as my father does. We all have our own favorite franchises around, so we all differ a little bit with like our top franchises, but I don't think there's one that we all dislike. I just think that there are some that we hold near and dear to our heart a little bit more than others.
So for me, the movie I felt like was a little slow at times because of that. Like you mentioned your like 2024 lens. Like for movies that I'm used to, I feel like this movie developed a lot of the tropes that we all know and love today, and I think it was kind of a blueprint for other slasher films to come out down the road.
I agree,
but being one of the first, it's like I mean, the over the shoulder shot of him watching Laurie walk away, cool, but it like goes on for way too long.
Well, yeah, but I mean, I think that it's super. I mean, I don't think there's anything wrong with this movie. I wouldn't other than like the sexualization. But again, that's something that kind of comes and goes.
So you would take that out?
I don't think it's necessary. Put a t-shirt on. If you really want the male gaze, put her in a white t-shirt. You can still see her nips. Whatever. I don't care. It's just annoying.
But it does bother you.
Yeah, I mean, it's just annoying. I don't think it's necessary. Like, we can, it's inferred that they had sex. Got it. You can also do that. Back in the day, they had rules where you couldn't show that stuff, so they would have to, like, be, like, in the bed with, like, undergarments on, like, FCC regulations and stuff like that. They had so many strict regulations, and then they started letting up on them as time went on. And now it just feels like you can get away with almost basically porn sometimes. Yeah. And it's like, I don't like, hate that, like, any form of that. Sometimes it just depends on the content that's being shown, and this involving teenagers is kind of weird, even though these teenagers do look like they're 40 years old, except for Jamie Lee Curtis.
But they're supposed to, we're supposed to assume that they're teenagers. And I really want to talk about this just because there's so much content on like people who are doing the same thing that we do and review horror movies, and it's typically a bunch of dudes at a table talking to each other about this kind of thing, and they're either excited about it or about the sexuality, or they don't mention it that much.
They're like, boobs! boobs, and
exactly.
I'm just like,
so
okay.
I do. Have
you ever seen boobs before?
I want to hear more women talk about this. I'm so interested in their perspective. I wish often that I could hear like Jamie Lee Curtis talk about it. Like, how does she feel about like the sexuality in the film? You know, how does Deborah Hill feel about it? I want to know.
I think that it's not so. Like you mentioned, it depends on the content that is being shown to us. I do think that in some cases it's fine, whatever. I think that, especially body horror, I understand that body horror, specifically like Evil Dead or like any David Cronenberg film or Brandon Cronenberg, like those movies are body horror and they're supposed to be gross, grotesque, show you things that you're like, oh, like really make your stomach turn. And it's really supposed to be about the body, and body horror is just a whole different, like layer. Okay. But I think that sometimes, especially in this movie, like if you took those parts out, I think it would still be fine. But it's like, it's not necessary, but it's also not necessary, I guess, to take it out. I just think that it's kind of like, more tits, okay.
Yeah, it doesn't do anything for you.
No, I mean, no. I'm not like, oh my God, tits, it's a win. Like, I'm not like one of the bros. Like, I whatever, they're tits. I have tits. I see them all the time. Mm-hmm. Cool.
I did mention to Bailey, like, while we were watching this movie, I'm like, you always see, like, tits and ass from girls, but you never see a bunch of dudes naked. You never get a lot of schlong.
You know what? I bet if they started doing that, they'd be like, no more naked people, please.
Well, Bailey, that's what she said. She was like, I wonder why they never show the dudes. And then Bailey said it's because the men don't want to see that.
Yeah, Patrick said that himself. We were talking about Game of Thrones, and he said whenever he sees like a penis on screen, he's always just like, it bums him out. And I'm like, why? It's just, I mean, a lot of the time it's a prosthetic. Yeah. It's not even real.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, but like you want to see like full frontal women and boobs and butts and stuff of women? I just don't understand. I don't understand. I can't fathom it.
I'm with you, yeah.
Because I'm just like, you want equality? Fine, be equal on all of the nudity. Yeah. Show all the nudity then.
No, I am completely with you, and whoever's listening to this, take it as you will. But when I'm watching X-Men Days of Future Past, and I see Hugh Jackman stand up from the bed, and you can see his bare ass. Okay. I'm just like, yes. Okay. Like I'm not that I'm like into Hugh Jackman's ass or anything, but like
Who isn't?
I do like it when like you said, kind of equality. Like if you're gonna show this, show that.
If they show men, I feel like they're never showing like men that look like other men. They're showing these really like overly pretty like celebrity males. Yeah. Like Henry Cavill. Obviously, he's a god. Look at him. Mm-hmm. He was crafted by the gods.
They're always like these super dehydrated, super built men that are like
I want to see more chubby bodies on screen. Show more naked chubby bodies.
No, it has to be the male fantasy. They don't want to see anything
Men like it.
Fantasy.
Men like it. They're lying.
That's what I'm saying.
It's so dumb. Especially like when I see posts about women and women are like, this whole like this part of my body, like my belly, just ruins my outfit. And it's like, babe, that's where your organs are. Like, I just don't understand it because it's like men love that, and like but these movies and society and media make you think that it's not necessary to show that, and it's annoying.
I mean, even in this movie Halloween, the person, like I mentioned, no shame to her. Like I said, I think she has a really underrated role in the movie. But the person we see naked, full frontal at the beginning of the movie, is the Playboy model. Yeah. Like it wasn't just some person. It was like they wanted to get this person who was known for being very attractive.
That's just annoying because it's like it should be based on their ability to act. Mm-hmm. To me, now I understand sometimes cameos are fun. Like, oh yes, this notable person has made a cameo in my movie. That's fun sometimes, but it depends, again, on the context of that. Like, Stephen King typically makes cameos in all of his films, a lot of the time. And that's fun, because when you can spot him, you're like, oh my god, he's the gravedigger. Like, it's just, like, random things that I don't feel like necessarily, like, this, it's like a throwaway.
Well, I appreciate your input and your thoughts on the subject. Like I said, I feel like they're
a little rambled, and I'm all over the place. It really depends on what I'm watching, but I don't mind. Like, for example, there's a notable film called X, and it's about them. It's a slasher film, but it's about them making porn. That is part of the story, and it makes total sense why we see all of that. And I don't mind it because it's part of the story. Mm-hmm. But a lot of the time, if it's anywhere else, it's just like, come on, more nudity.
Well, I want to add. Well, some movies want to be a little sexy.
I get
Does
it.
that bug you?
No, not necessarily.
And sometimes it's not like, I know we're talking about this movie features nudity,
Yeah.
but sometimes films try to be sexy without including like some people would venture to say the relationship between Morticia and Gomez, it's a little arousing the way they talk to each other or something. Like,
yeah.
It's not necessarily all about, being in bed or whatever. There's also this like dialogue, playing with each other. And I do say, there's so much more prevalent in horror movies, and I think you guys are right. I do think it is by men, for men. Like, we're putting that in for the other guys in the movie theater.
This is also an independent film, so I mean, there probably wasn't any producer being like, we have to have boobs. So I mean,
well, then whose decision was it? Like, it was some guy. Like, it was probably
somebody.
John Carpenter had some influence in that.
But
like I said, like there was women involved in this project, notable women. The costume designer was also a woman. I mean, one of the actresses, the actress who played Annie,
mm-hmm.
she was also Lancey Keys, who was credited as Nancy Loomis. She was also the costume designer on there, and
Very
she
cool.
knew Deborah Hill personally. And so like, there was women working on this movie together. I know at the time, I mean, you'd get smacked across the face if you made a bad cup of coffee for your husband.
yeah.
But still, so I don't know. Maybe they just didn't have enough input, or maybe we keep talking about people had different perspectives back in the day.
I think there's also something to say. I'm not saying that this is what was going on with this movie in particular, but I know a lot of women who are in show business, just back at Hollywood, between like the 40s and the 70s, like it was expected for your job to be inherently sexual, be it on screen or off screen. Like that was part of the job.
That's part of the culture. Like if you worked in an office.
It's not something that they necessarily wanted. It was just accepted that like if they wanted to be an actress, they had to do sexual favors.
Like Scream 3.
Exactly.
I will even say, like, I think that's even prevalent in like office settings at the time.
Yeah.
Like if you were applying to be like a secretary at an office job, I think you're kind of expecting to have men flirt with you, and you're kind of expecting to like flirt back with them to keep your job. Like,
it's just horrible that that's the reality. But I think that also has a huge part in it. And I'm not saying that this is really just a huge tangent, honestly, because we're not really talking about the content of Halloween. But I just think that overall, I'm not saying it's take it or leave it. You know what I mean? Like it's
Mm-hmm.
fine either way. The movie's fine. It doesn't add anything to the movie. It doesn't take away anything from the movie either. You know.
Well, what do you think about Michael Myers as a character? Like, what sets him apart, do you think? And do you think he's one of the greats?
I think he is one of the greats. I think that what makes him terrifying is that he looks like an average man. That's what makes it terrifying. But he could be just seen as this personification of evil or reflection of society. And I won't delve too much into that. I just think that over time, he's just not human to me. But I think that they make it in a way that he is just this person who, has no remorse, has no feelings. He just killed his sister out of nowhere, and now he wants to go back for more.
Do you feel like this movie has heart in it? Because I do feel like the stage is set for scaring people. And I think Jamie Lee Curtis gives an amazing performance.
The OG Scream Queen, yeah, absolutely.
And Laurie is a great character. I love seeing Laurie with the two kids. Mm-hmm. I love seeing her babysit these two kids. I
also love that our final girl is also like, she's not sexualized. Her friends are very different from her, and she is very innocent, and she is all about kids and like doing the right thing and studying, doing her homework. Like I just think that for me it's a wonderful role model for me personally. I think that even then, I don't know if maybe that was intended to be that way, where she is so different from her friends, and her friends are like, oh yeah, parties, boys, drugs, it's like, I like the difference between the two. Not that that's a bad thing if you're either, I just think that it's really fascinating for a horror film to have that, because a lot of the time, I don't know, like it's overly violent towards the final girl, and it's overly, but I mean, she fights back, and I don't feel like we get a lot of the fighting back, even with Sally Hardesty in Texas Chainsaw. She just goes crazy in the end. She doesn't really, I don't feel like she fights back as much.
No,
she just runs
mostly
away.
runs. Yeah, I mean, like you said, this movie is credited with being a big contribution to the concept of the final girl. Sally Hardesty from Texas Chainsaw actually came before this, but you're right. She doesn't fight back like Laurie does.
Yeah, Laurie, is innovative.
Yeah, I will say though, Laurie, please. Though we were complaining so much about this, she stabs him with like this little knit. What are those things called?
Wire hanger.
No, before that, when she's like in the room after watching a movie, there's like a knitting ball, and she takes one of the needles.
Yes. I mean, I will say sometimes those knitting needles, those hurt.
Yeah,
depending.
but my problem is that she stabs him in the neck with it, and he like falls to the ground, lays down on there, and then she's like, "Oh, good, he's dead. Let me just chill out now."
But then again, it's a teenager. If you think about it, you gotta really think about it.
Do you think you as a teen you just hang out after all that happened?
As a teenager, I was a stupid teenager, and as a teenager, I was naive, so I probably would have done the same thing.
Well, sure, maybe the first time,
especially if you don't know how strong you are, or you don't.
But then they go upstairs and it happens again with the coat hanger. I'm just like, come on. Also, in general, these are babysitters and they're teenagers, like we mentioned before.
Yeah.
I don't know if I trust these teenagers to take care of my kids.
Well, I mean.
But you did it.
I babysat kids all the time. And I was good at it. I enjoyed hanging with kids.
Do you think
stuff.
you trust some 15, 16-year-olds to take care of your niece?
It would depend. It would depend greatly on if I know their. But that's the thing is a lot of the time, the parents knew me, so the parents trusted me, and they knew my parents, that kind of thing.
Were you reliable? Do you think?
Yeah, I was reliable. I had no other reason to not be. You know what I mean?
It was a little odd to me that. Obviously it's a big theme in this movie that Laurie is a babysitter and she's babysitting these kids on Halloween. Why is she babysitting kids on Halloween? Are their parents just really neglectful?
They gotta go to a Halloween party, get crunk.
Yeah, but why aren't they taking their kids trick-or-treating, dog? All the other kids are trick-or-treating in the neighborhood.
I will say a lot of the time back then, from what I've seen in films and everything, they depicted like trick-or-treating a little bit earlier in the evening, and then when it was dark, the parents
would go out.
They would be at home eating their candy, watching movies.
Maybe.
So it could have been because they did that in Hocus Pocus.
They did.
Yeah, that's true.
Like they were trick or treating when it was light outside, though. So it's like, I always waited until it was dark.
But I never saw the kids talking about trick or treating or eating any candy. And while they were being babysat, there were other kids actively trick or treating.
That is kind of, you know what? There's a question for Deborah Hill and John Carpenter there.
Yeah.
You got us there.
My vote is that their parents are neglectful and don't want to spend time with their kids.
I like that too because it goes into my whole part about parents being neglectful at the time.
I love Halloween parties and I wouldn't want to bring my kids to a Halloween party. I mean, because, sometimes people had like weird office parties too, is what I've seen like depicted. Like, oh yeah, the office is having a Halloween party. Let's go.
Why is that weird?
I don't feel like people. Well, I guess I'm so coded in the Bible Belt, so I'm like, what? Halloween party at work? I don't imagine people that I know like throwing a Halloween party for work kind of thing. Now, Christmas parties is a different thing. Christmas parties, everyone, does Christmas. And I say that very lightly because obviously, if you're watching the video, I did air quotes. But if you're just listening, I did air quotes. So,
we always do our Christmas party for my work, like in March.
What? In March?
Yeah.
What?
Because we can't figure anything out by Christmas, so it's always in March.
They're very bad at planning over there.
Yeah, we've had like bowling one year, bowling another year, axe throwing another year. But I don't know what it is. Maybe it's too expensive to like book a venue.
Sometimes it is, and especially around Christmas time, I bet everything's booked up.
Yeah, so maybe they're like, we'll just wait until March.
It's probably slower then.
Yeah, probably. Who's coming out for Easter?
That's when it's actually snowy here.
That's true.
That's true. Yeah. It's true. We get late snow, which is stupid. But yeah, I don't know. That's a really good point that you're making there. But I know that a lot of the time in movies and shows I've watched, parents typically are going out to like a drinking Halloween party. So of course they're gonna leave somebody responsible with their children while they're out. And I feel like kids now don't get the Halloween that we had, and I just think that it sucks for them because a lot of people were like, let's move Halloween. Bitch, you can't do that. I'm sorry. Halloween is Halloween. Go on Halloween. It's what we had to do. If it was a school night, we went on Halloween.
Sounds like you're being kind of a boomer right now.
I don't care.
You're like, back in my day?
Back in my day, we went on Halloween. You can't change Halloween. It's on the calendar, October 31st. Thank you. Moving on. That was aggressive.
Yeah, I like the spin of your neck you did there.
I bet my buns were going a little crazy. That was probably fun. And I love Dr. Loomis. I shot him 6 times. I shot him in the heart. Like, he's amazing. Amazing. His dedication to tracking down Michael. He just wants him to be away where he can't harm anybody.
What a patient-doctor relationship that is.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, I tried to, I was his doctor for 15 years. And like, even when you see him in the car with the nurse that's going to take, like, she's like, yeah, I don't really, just drug him up. Because I don't want him to ever leave this facility. Yeah. Which is so messed up to me.
Yeah. Yeah. But I mean, we don't really know because we don't get to see that interaction for those 15 years. So it's something that we never get to experience. We don't really know what may or may not have happened or what he may or may not have said.
Yeah, it's interesting. You're right about what may or may have happened because he was in that facility for 15 years.
Yeah.
But when he escapes, he can drive the car. And he drives around the whole town super often.
Yeah.
How the hell does he know how to drive a car if he hadn't spoken a word in 15 years and spent his whole time staring at a wall?
That I don't know. That is why I think that he's not really a real human. It's more of a personification of evil and our society reflected in that.
So in that, like, society is evil? Or what's the reflection?
I think it would depend. It would depend on the time frame. And I can't delve too much into that. I'm not going to delve too much into that because we'll talk about it as time goes on. Okay. But I don't know. He's either superhuman or he's just the personification of evil itself and what evil can do to people and communities and all kinds of things.
Like dress up as a ghost and put glasses over your sheet?
Yep. I think I love that scene though. It's really funny because it's like, come on, you did Bob dirty.
I think all the scenes where he's choking up both Lindsay and Annie are funny to me. Because first of all, the telephone cord that he wraps around one of them, it's like so flimsy and loose. And by the time she gives out, she does like the typical like tilt head, stick out tongue, blah, I'm dead kind of interaction. And I think it's a movie of its time.
I love
for
how
sure.
funny, because this movie it does have some humor in there sprinkled in. And I think it's funny that whenever she's on the phone with Linda and she's, being choked out, Laurie's like, okay, I get it. You're having a good time. Yeah. It's just, I think it's hilarious. Yeah. Personally.
It's like the boy who cried wolf. Oh, wow. It's like the boy who cried wolf a little bit.
A little bit, yeah. It's like, why'd you call me? That's what you're going to do, kind of thing. I get it, but it's just funny to me. I love the scenes where we get to talk to Annie and Linda, and you see the differences between Laurie and her friends. She's just not interested in the things that they are interested in. I don't know if there was more thought put into that. Maybe she was just like, I want to get out of this town. I don't know.
To me, it's another one of those things where I feel like it comes from a bad place. Like, oh, look at the slutty girls. They deserve to die. Well, like if you want to be like a good girl, you should be like Laurie. Like Laurie, she lives because she has these good virtues.
Like a cautionary tale.
Yeah, and I just think that's kind of a little messed up. Like that's kind of determining like what makes you a good person, but only if you're a woman. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
it's almost like slut shaming a little bit.
Yeah, but that's the thing is that they do that all the time. Like, you're either too much of a prude or you're too slut. There's never an in between. There's never a right in the middle. Not, no. So there's either way you go, you're screwed.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's definitely something that's super interesting. I love the bully, Lonnie. He's funny. I don't love him, but I think that his character is funny. Because when they're like messing with Tommy and stuff, they're like, don't you know what Halloween's all about? And he's like, yeah, candy. And then he's like, no, he's going to get you. He's going to get you. The boogeyman is coming.
Yeah, the whole thing was Uncanny Valley for me.
Really?
Yeah, just because it was like AI wrote the scene. Because no children would ever like just start like in unison from the beginning saying the boogeyman, the boogeyman, the boogeyman.
That is
like
true.
The way they were bullying this kid was like the most unnatural human interaction I've ever seen.
It would all be so scattered.
Yeah, it wouldn't be so like random. Anything like that.
That's definitely good. Now that you point that out, I'm like, that is weird. Yeah. Obviously very choreographed. Yeah. We love it. I love that her father is a realtor, and I know that they have this map in Dead by Daylight of the Strode house, or not Strode house, Myers house, Haddonfield, and I love the realty, like the sign. Love it. I love this movie. It's iconic. It has a very near and dear place in my heart. Obviously, it's not amazing 100% in the time frame specifically, and I know that, but knowing that it's, you know, such an independent film in that regard makes it that much more lovable to me, because Patrick's like, well, if this movie was in 1978 and this movie was in this time frame and they had more money, like, why didn't they do more with what they had, kind of thing. And it's like, whoa, chill out. Yeah. We're not the ones who made the movie, so like I don't know what to tell you. But like he critiques A Nightmare on Elm Street a lot of the time because of the graphics, and he's like, it just looks so cheap. But I'm like, it's the 80s. I don't know what you want. But he's like, other 80s movies don't look like that, and I'm like, I don't know what to freaking tell you. They had more money.
Well, like I said, like this movie was made on $300,000. $75,000 of that budget was used on the cameras, because they wanted a good-looking film. And say what you want about the narrative, or about the plot, or about the performances even. This movie looks great. Like I watched it. I watched the HD version. I rented that one. Yeah. Looks amazing.
I think it's great. I think the colors are great. The movie, like, the movie making quality is just, you know, phenomenal. I love some of those long scenes because to me it just adds a sense of eeriness.
Yeah, you know, I mean, like taken out of the context of the film, just visually speaking, they're very interesting. Like seeing the over the shoulder shot while Laurie's walking away, seeing Michael Myers come out of the shadow of a closet.
But also iconic. Love Jamie Lee Curtis, Scream Queen. Her scream, amazing.
Yeah, she was great in the movie. Mm-hmm. Great performance. I think best performance of the movie. You ready to rate the movie, Geraldine?
Absolutely.
Okay, I'll go ahead and go first. Like I mentioned, I feel like the movie is the one that it set a lot of tropes, but my experience watching it for the first time, I thought it was very slow. It was one of those things where while experiencing it, I kind of threw my hands up and was like, "What's the big deal?"
Okay.
With this movie, but. Just like when somebody watches Casablanca for the first time and is like, oh my gosh, this movie is so like cheesy.
I've never said that when I watched Casablanca.
Well, what people don't understand is like, this is the movie that started that. This is what started like the corny romance movie. So like at the time it was seen differently, and I can only expect the same thing was true for Halloween. Carpenter's vision for Halloween was to create a film that was both terrifying and thought-provoking. He wanted to explore the dark side of human nature, like, you know, you keep on talking about with Michael Myers being the personification of evil, in the sense that there's a potential for evil that exists inside everybody.
Hey, on the money!
I think John Carpenter, you know, like I said earlier, Deborah Hill is the one that wrote all the babysitter stuff. Mm-hmm. Well, John Carpenter, he's like all those lines about like,
evil.
Yeah, like there was like a darkness behind his eyes. That was all Carpenter, because I feel like that is kind of the stuff that he's interested in, and I think that's why he's like orientated into his particular way into horror movies. I mean, we kind of saw the same thing with Christine, where it's like this car had a manifestation on another character, and he was turning this other character evil. Halloween is a film that is both a product of its time and a timeless classic. It is a film that had a profound impact on horror cinema and continues to be enjoyed by audiences around the world. So I think this movie is important. This is a very important movie, despite what I experienced while watching it 50 years after it was made.
That's a long ass time.
It's a long time. It's just different, right? Mm-hmm. That being said, I do understand how important it was, and I think all the behind the scenes information about the cast and crew is so interesting, and given the influence it's had on future slasher films to come, I give this movie an 8 out of 10.
An 8 out of 10. I think that's respectable. Obviously, this movie is not perfect in quality, but I think that there is a lot of love, being that it is a passion project. $300,000 is just shocking.
$70 million.
And 70 million being what they made. Obviously, this movie itself, you know, really just unleashed the slashers as we know it. And I think that it is fun. It is intriguing and suspenseful, and you don't know what's coming next, other than the music kind of helps guide you there, where you're like, oh no, you hear that kind of thing, and then you're like, oh, he's around. Terrifying in nature. And the music really, really sells it for me, and that's, I think, what makes it even more enjoyable, is it's just so beloved. I don't know. So to me, despite some of the flaws and the male gaze and whatnot, like, again, it's still a very rich story, and, you know, you just want everyone to get out okay. You're like, oh my God, ah. So to me, I'm going to rate it a 9 out of 10.
9 out of 10. All right, well, this is our first movie of the season, so it's automatically number 1.
We'll see what happens after that, because I also enjoy some of the other ones.
Yeah, we'll see. I hope you guys watch these movies alongside with us if it's your first time, or if you're coming back to the franchise and want to watch it again just in time for October, just in time for Halloween itself. Bailey, what did you think about the movie?
Okay, so don't hate me.
Okay.
I don't think that the movie is bad, but I don't think that it's great.
Yeah.
I see and I understand why it became kind of a hit, though. I think it was probably one of the very first movies that had like this prolonged sense of anticipation and tension. So, you know, we know Michael Myers is like a stalker, essentially. And he stalks the people throughout this movie. And that's supposed to... I was talking to Frankie about this a lot as we were watching the movie and taking breaks and things like that, but they show Michael doing not a whole lot of stuff other than just standing around, because they wanted to have cool moments in the theater where people were like, oh no, he's right there, what's he gonna do? And keeping them on the edge of their seat.
That is true.
But I think, you know, that sense just hasn't aged well as we've grown with horror movies as a genre. There are better ways that you can create anticipation without like leading the viewer on so much. Because essentially that's what most of the movie is you're waiting for Michael to do something and he just doesn't. And when he does do something, like it's like, oh yay, he did it. And then immediately after it's just dragged out again. And so because of that, I feel like the movie is just so slow and a little bit of a downer sometimes. I don't know. This sounds really negative. I did enjoy the movie a lot and I had fun during certain parts. But it's just like I'm waiting for him to do something and then nothing happens. And I'm like, oh man, like why are we spending 20 minutes on what's her name, Annie, in the laundry room? You know?
I mean, that's what I was going to reference. It's just like he had so much opportunity to kill Annie in the laundry room.
Never did it because we wanted to get a shot of her in her panties.
I guess so. With Lindsay, with the kid there, I guess was just weird.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, why did we even have that scene? I guess you're right. It's for anticipation. It's for the suspense.
Yeah.
You know, it's a product of its time. But
it is.
Given all that, what do you rate it?
Yeah, I'm not judging it super, super hard as a product of its time. But in 2024, I'm giving it a 5 because it's not bad, but it's not great. So it's very middle of the road for me. I'll definitely rewatch it sometime, but it's just like the things that I enjoyed in this movie are not enough to like promote it. But I think maybe I see why it's so popular. I see why it's so beloved. I respect it super hard. Like I said, I enjoyed parts of this movie. I'm hoping that as the series and franchise grows, that I'll see some growth in like the story department.
Well, that's very interesting because, you know, there are way more recent versions of this film that probably fit more of our audience sensibilities that we have for movies nowadays. I am going to be super interested in your scores this season, though, Bailey, probably more than other seasons. When we're starting off at a 5, I am so curious to see like the wonder of like the progression of that 5. Is it going to go any higher? Is it going to stay in the same area? It's a really exciting prospect for me.
I just have to look at it, whatever Kamala says, in the context of my environment.
Yeah.
Where we just finished doing some Tim Burton movies and Beetlejuice, which I rated around the 8s and 9s.
Yeah.
So myself,
in that context,
I cannot rate Halloween up there. I don't think it's terrible. I really don't think it's bad. I think it's very enjoyable. I just have my criticisms.
Okay.
And I am like excited to see if they're going to grow.
Okay. Me too. I am also excited.
I'm very curious to know how she's going to feel about the different timelines, because
Me too.
Knowing that you guys have not seen any of the other movies, this is the first.
This is the first time I've seen Halloween, and this is the most of a movie of any Halloween movie.
I have
I've
seen every single one of them, so it's going to be a ride. It's going to be a ride, and I'm very excited to see what happens.
Me too. I'm excited too. The other thing I wanted to mention is just like, you know, some people watch horror movies for comfort. I don't know if you're one of those people, Geraldine.
Yeah, it depends on the
Halloween. This is actually one I could see watching for comfort.
It is a comfort.
Just because it's not super scary. It's kind of chill. Throw it on. It's vibes, baby.
Well, I mean, also the fact that it's like October time frame, and it's like, you know, I also enjoy watching Trick or Treat. That's a comfort horror film for me as well. Like, it's just so cozy. I just love the idea of like Halloween. It's just like, oh, it wraps you in a blanket. You know, you can just eat, you know, junk food and candy, and it feels like Halloween. I just love it.
Well, guys, we'll be back next week with Halloween 2.
Halloween 2.
Hope to see you then. Hope you watch the movie with us. And yeah, we'll see you then. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to Fright or Flight, a Live Oaks Village production. This episode was hosted by Geraldine Johnson and Saul Alberto Arizmendi Ochoa. Editing and music composition by Saul Alberto Arizmendi Ochoa.